right. Hi, everybody. Welcome into UnAnchored Boston. Once again, as always, we're brought to you by Cold Springs RV, your destination for all things camping. And where? We're in New Hampshire, of course, and the great George Gray, the big wheel we call him, at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 419 Mass Ave in Lexington. Well, we're thrilled this morning to have a good friend of ours and the best hockey writer in the business, best writer, period. Kevin Paul Dupont is here, and Lobel always needs to make the formal introduction, Kevin.
He does.
Okay. Lobel, take it away.
Well, I don't know how full it is, but I want it to be right because there's no hockey writer that's as erudite as.
What was that word?
Erudite. It's a Harvard thing. I didn't go to Harvard. I went to Kent State. So those are the kind of words we dealt with out there. I don't know what kind of. Don't get me started on the Harvard thing. I mean,
go ahead. Big game against Yale this week.
Kevin went to BU. You know, you don't have any. You don't have a lot of allies here today, Lynchy. So just know what the story is.
And I commuted. I wasn't one of the rich kids in the dorms.
Well, from Bedford, you lived in Bedford.
You bet. 22 miles each way, brother.
Man, that's pretty good. Born in Springfield.
Yeah. Wow.
Home of the Basketball Hall of Fame, and he ended up being a hockey. This is my question. How did a guy that's such a okay, this is a loaded. This is going to sound wrong no matter what I say. It has nothing to do with my feelings for hockey or anything else. I love the sport dearly. Playoff hockey is the best competition in the world. What do you got? What's that?
You see that jersey right there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they're my Maple Leaf jersey.
Yeah, when I was in, as we all were, St. John's Elementary School in Swampscott, during art class, the nuns would always say, draw a picture of what you want to be when you grow up. So everyone wrote, fireman, policeman, doctor, nurse. And my brother and I played, like we all did, played table hockey. And the two teams in table hockey were always the Canadians and the Maple Leafs. And my favorite player was Frank Mahovlich. So I always drew a picture of Frank Mahovlich in art class. That's what I wanted to be, or who I wanted to be when I grew up. So last year I bought the jersey. TikTok was having a sale, and on the back is number 27. It says Mahovlich.
Cool.
So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. There it is, art class.
Okay, well, it brings me right back to Dupes, who becomes the most erudite hockey writer in the world. And I just would want to say, how does a guy with that kind of skill settle in a sport with hockey? And now I know you've done some other things, but that is your first love by far. And hockey's the kind of sport that's in your face all the time. And you're not, as a writer.
Yeah.
Good golly, Miss Molly was the great line that I thought you wrote 2 Saturdays ago about the column when the Bruins were over in the third period, which to me was one of the best columns I've written in a long time. And to be about hockey, it was just really pretty remarkable. Okay, Dupes, why hockey? Why this? Why this passion?
Well, first of all, thanks for the nice words. I'm at home right now, and I rarely hear nice words at home, so that's really it's really touching. Thank you, guys. The only twist and turn I can give to that story, Lobie, is that actually baseball was my first love, and Shaughnessy and I both graduated from college together. We were roomies together. We were both on that MLB track, and couldn't get enough of Red Sox as a kid. Bruins too, but mostly Red Sox. And then, not to go too deep into this, but when I was first a staff writer at the Old Herald, and this would have been in the late 70s and then into the early 80s, I was a Red Sox beat guy at a very young age. And then we had an office coup. And the next thing I know, I was the Bruins beat guy, which was ostensibly meant for me to quit. But all the hamburger jobs were full that day, so I stayed on, and here I am. So I didn't like it at first. I soon loved it, and you guys know, you were around it in the late 70s and early 80s. It was, the other sports were great too. The Red Sox had the one-game playoff with the Yankees and Zimmer and Lynn and all of it. It was great stuff. But that lunch pail gang into the 80s and Cherry and the craziness of Too Many Men on the Ice in '79, there was always so much drama in it. And as we saw, I mean, I often think of this period with our good friend Clark Booth doing essays around everything, but his essays around the Bruins were phenomenal. All these years later, what's kept me in it is really the people. It's an industry with good people in all parts of it. The industry, the media, of course, the media thing is, we could do a whole show on that, how the media thing has diminished here, and especially here in the last 10 years. But it's just, and then probably the ultimate part of it, and this is the great part in the writing instance, might not be on the TV side, which you guys could speak more to, but it's wacky. It's so whimsical and capricious that, it's an industry built on 6 ounces of bouncing rubber. Nothing is wackier than that.
Puck luck.
Puck luck, or just total whimsy, off the glass, into the crowd, off the guy's ass, into the net. It's got everything. So for emotion and unpredictability, there really is no sport like it. I watch the NFL, and the NFL is great, but to me, so much of it is predictable and static, and
right. That's so true.
Set up at the line, snap the ball, 6 seconds of action. Let's do it again. 6 seconds. And great. There's some great action in it, but for sustained action, drop it in the middle. Everybody scrambles. It's really kind of, it's I don't want to call it a gentleman's version, but it's kind of UFC in that sense.
Isn't it interesting, Lynchy, that you can make sense of it? You can write it and try to make sense of it when there's really no way to make sense of it, because there's flow, but then there's not flow, and there's how do you make sense of it? So then you go back to things like, okay, Kevin, you're there. Is it coaching? Well, let's talk about the quality of this team, since we're zeroing in. Is it coaching? Is it talent? Is it leadership? Is it front office? This is not a good hockey team right now by any stretch of the imagination.
No, it isn't. And I preface all these things by, here's my opinion at this hour, subject to change in the next hour. Of
course, that's it.
Because I know how these things go. They'll win 10 in a row and we'll all look like dunces. Not that we need help. The truth of the matter is I see it in the moment, is it's poorly engineered. That they went out and they spent the $84 million on Elias Lindholm and on Nikita Zadorov, and they got $84 million worth of nothing. Those two aren't playing well. It isn't all on them. There's a whole lot of parts here. It's unmotivated. I don't know why guys aren't motivated, why guys don't play with emotion, whether they recognize that the two parts didn't put them where they want to be, whatever. So there's a lot of reasons, but I think overall, it's easy to trace it to Montgomery and say, listen, they're not playing well. Goodbye. We'll bring in a new guy. But I think it's far deeper than that at the moment, and that they're, as you say, they're not good. They don't execute well. They play stupid hockey on many nights, stupid play. The most recent loss to Columbus being a showcase piece of it, 2 shorthanded goals against. They're just a mess. And sometimes, and we've watched teams do this, all sports, they lose their confidence, they lose everything. And to me, that's where they are at the moment. But it's mostly, I think, it's not a good roster. And the macro picture there is, how do you compete for a cup? You need 3 pieces. You need a franchise goalie, a franchise defenseman, a franchise center. They had that with Rask and Chara and Bergeron. They had more of it because they had Marchand in his prime. They had Krejci as really a number 1A elite center. So they had a lot of part. Culturally here, as we know, most of those guys are gone. The only guy left is Marchand, and the sustainability from underneath hasn't evolved. Charlie hasn't evolved. Swayman hasn't evolved yet. And I think that's asking a lot of a very young goaltender. But Charlie should be at the doorstep of being an elite defenseman now. He isn't.
as you pointed out in the Ophir column.
Right. Right. Yeah, those guys. Yeah. And again, that list expands at the moment. But again, I will say this: they're always interesting, right? We've seen some bad times here. The Casper years, the years leading up to Joe Thornton being the #1 pick. Everybody's saying I'll never come back. I hate the pride. But they do. It really is. That's another thing that's kept me tethered to this. It really is underneath. It's very much a hockey town. It's not to say that it isn't.
No, you're right.
It isn't a Red Sox town or it isn't a Patriot. It's all of that. But boy, 100 years going as of next weekend, the passion is entrenched here. Yes, it has its highs and lows, but it's embedded in our sports culture. And even a bad team like this, I don't think is going to wipe it away.
My theory, way to fix it is to bring Milbury back and let him just take over everything. That's my, you know what? That's the kind of sport it is. And he's the kind of guy that can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And believe me, I've thought the same. I loved Mike's style. As we know, in 2024, it probably lasts about 18 minutes in terms of effectiveness. But yeah, I mean, they do, and they tried that with the VL kid last night, right? They plug in a kid who's marginal talent. He fights, he fights in the opening 2.5 minutes there with really no context. It's hard to justify fighting in today's game as much as I loved it way back when. But if you're going to do it, have some context to it. Have a shift where it means something. It just struck me as one of these stage things. And here's what I'm to do. Good for him. I mean, it's a hard job, but it was really a hiccup in a hurricane in terms of its effectiveness.
Oops, the benching of Pasternak for the third period in that game. Sometimes that has galvanized the team. Sometimes it causes the coach to lose the room. Did he lose the room when he benched Pasternak that night?
You can make that trace, and you could be right. I can't definitely say that. They later, of course, the timeline is foggy for me without my notes right in front of me. But they later had the comeback game against St. Louis where they were down 2-0. They run up 3 goals. I think if you've quit on the coach, you don't get that period to come back from a 2-0 game in the coach's hometown. So I'm not necessarily buying it. Now, here's where I'll try to cut myself an excuse. None of us, first and foremost myself, who's been around it longer than anybody there now, we're not in the room to know that anymore. There was a time in the 70s and 80s when, frankly, during a practice at the old Garden, I would sometimes just sit in the room and not even watch practice and get guys shoot the breeze with the trainers and get the first guy off just to get him because he came off because he's got a gash on his face. So they're stitching him up. So you really knew the people and the product and you had a firm hand on it. Now we're not allowed that access. We get very minimal access with the athletes. So to have a guy whisper in your ear as they would have in the old days, listen, we can't stand this guy. I don't get that sense, and I only wish I could get that sense.
I've had some people, even at a function I was at on Sunday, we were talking about Swayman versus Allmark, and I was surprised that these people, and they were, knowledgeable hockey people. It was blood and guts hockey fans,
Yep.
And they were saying that they thought Allmark was a better goalie, and they were disappointed in the way that all worked out. But what happened was management really put themselves in a box so poorly by making the deal with Allmark and that he could only take so many teams or go to so many teams, and then ending up with having to acquiesce to whatever demands Swayman had. I mean, it just was a disaster kind of a negotiation between those two guys.
Yeah, certainly that's how it played out. Now, the front part of your question, who's the better goalie?
Yeah, that's the front part.
Yeah, the front part is I would go with Swayman for a number of reasons. He's younger, he's extremely agile, he's smart, and again, Ullmark is a lot of these. I don't think there's a huge delta between them, but I think for the promise, attitude, also, and this factors in the fact that they drafted him, and they've had a history here of poor drafts, especially the last 10 years. Never have drafted a franchise goalie. So, he had a lot going for him in that sense. But I think technically, positionally, athletically, I give the nod, and I get it. Total sense. We're going to lock the guy in. He's our franchise goaltender. You can't be paying two guys in today's system, two guys top money for that position where they're only going to get 40, maximum 55 games for one guy. So a lot of it is the cap balancing act. Now, the other twist to the story, which is you trade the other guy before you've got the deal in the drawer for your sainted guy being Swayman. That played against them, and the agent did. The agent played it against them and got money, got big money. So there's a potential asterisk to that, which is maybe they felt they had that deal. Maybe they felt they had him locked in at 8 years, 7.5 million at 8 years. And then when they made the move, somebody did them wrong. Now that would either be the player or the agent, right? But and the reason I feel there's a string to pull on that one is, if you remember, just before the season began, and I'd say about 48 hours before Swayman finally signed, Neely went public with the numbers on a question I asked him at that group presser there.
Right.
And he said something to the effect of, I think there's $64 million reasons why I'd be playing. The fact that they went public with it, very unlike them. That put pressure on the agent. The deal got done very quickly, as you know. So, but yeah, and again, you get the CBA and the cap boxes teams in right now. People are screaming, trade this guy. And of course, what I'm hearing is trade everybody, get rid of everybody, get rid of Marchand, get rid of Pasternak. He didn't have a shot last night. That's only happened twice with Montgomery here. Get rid of McAvoy. He's lazy. Get rid of Swayman. He's no good. So, first of all, most of them are on no trades. Some of them are on no moves. You can't do anything to trade them. And then why aren't they practicing today? Well, they're not practicing today because that's the CBA. They have to get at least one day off a week. It's scheduled. Today's the scheduled day. So going back to the Terry O'Reilly as coach era, or Terry O'Reilly, there's no way they'd be off. Or Brian Sutter days. They'd have a 2-a-day today. That's the modern game. There's only so much you can do. And I suppose the Maraschino cherry to there's only so much you can do is the team you come out of the week of July 1 with is your team. There's not much changing it after that free agency day. The top names go in about 12 hours, and that's not an exaggeration. Sometimes it's even less. Sometimes it's 6 hours. Those guys are gone. They made their bets with those two guys. You can add on during the week, but once you lock in at that cap, and most every team goes to the top cap number like moths to a lamp, there's not much you can do.
I'm depressed now.
Well, I know it is. It is.
No, that's a very depressing way of looking at the whole.
I want to, Bob, move your head to your left a little bit. Left, no, move it the other way.
The other left.
Oh, yeah. See the panic button there, Duke? Is it time? Is it time to be hitting the panic button there?
It could be. Yes. No, and I will say this about Neely and Sweeney. They're not panic guys. They don't go out and make rash deals. What they have done typically here, to give them their marks, is when March comes around, or the March trade deadline, be it March 1 or 8 or sometimes February 25th or whatever it is, they've made some good add-ons. They've made good deals. Even the Rick Nash deal went upside down on him because he got another concussion. I think that was a good deal. It was well-intentioned. Had he not gotten a concussion right away, had he not retired because of that concussion, all the parade of horribles with that. They went out that year, just 2 years ago. They got Bertuzzi, they got Orloff, they got Hathaway. Again, smart moves. Went upside down right away, and because they went up against a very good Florida team. So to give them their marks, they've been able to, late in the season, go out and make some trades, but those significant moves don't happen now until March 1, March 8. And right now, this is a team on pace for 78 points. That's just going to be them moving bodies if they can.
What is it about this game? What is it about the culture of this game that manages to change coaches so frequently? It's like open the door and knock on the door, and another guy's going to be behind it.
Right.
I mean, it's unbelievable how quickly these guys come and go, which is why people look at Montgomery and say, okay, he's been there 2 years, 2.5 or whatever. And well, and what have we gotten? Nothing. So it's time for him to move on.
Yeah. And I think the answer to that is kind of what we saw last night with the lineup. They went out and got this kid who's of marginal talent, but plays with emotion. So I think in a lot of instances, these general managers, with the change of a coach, especially at this stage of a season, they are looking for the old little song, little dance, a little salsa down your pants, right? They're just looking for any way to get it. They did it with Mike Keenan, right? Remember? And that was an odd one. Harry went, this was late the prior season. Harry went on the road, and I was absolutely convinced, veteran journalist that I am, Pat Burns is gone. Pat Burns stayed the rest of the year. And then Harry gassed him eight games into the new season. But there's a perfect case of, try to get the guy to come in, rattle some cages, get him going. That's kind of the early season move. The most two recent changes they've made, I thought they were the wrong moves at the time, because I didn't think bringing Bruce Cassidy in would get any results better than we saw from Claude Julien. Wrong. They responded right away. They played great under Cassidy his whole time here. They got to the Game 7 of the Cup final in 19. Excellent coach, excellent pick by Sweeney and Neely. And then when they get rid of, very sort of emotionally, in my estimation, they get rid of Cassidy.
Why did they, talk about with a guy with that success, they'd kill for him now.
Yes, right. And I think they were guilty of listening to the working help. That he defended some guys with his honesty, and so they made the move based on that. Not a good move in and of itself. I'd much rather have Cassidy here today, but I have to say I was absolutely convinced Jim Montgomery wasn't getting any more out of the product than Cassidy was getting. And look, he turned into they played extremely well. 65, 12, and 5 to his first year. Best record in the history of the game. So you can't call him a bad coach. He's got some methods. He makes some mistakes. We've seen that. We've seen him come out too slowly in the playoffs. We saw a record number of too many men on the ice, which last year, which was just ridiculous. That's coaching stuff. So he's got his stuff too. But to go to your question, I think mostly it's because it is an emotional sport. Sometimes you do get that spark. We saw it last year with Edmonton. They were dreadful in the first 18, 20 games. They make the change. They get to the Cup final.
So here's the question here. The Bruins are a 500 team as we are taping this on November 19th. What would Harry do if he was running this organization right now? What would Harry do?
Yeah, no, he would make the change. There's no question about it. And that said, we're applying old world Harry here. which is that worked without a cap, could trade guys, didn't have no trade deals. So by now he would have made a significant trade or two if the coach. You can't. They just can't. The nature of it is you can't go out. You know, he traded Esposito in November of 75, coming up on 50 years of that. That goes back to you're locked in. So I think he would, even in today's game, he'd just say, listen, this is just 2 shorthanded goals last night. They've lost 3 at home, 3 in a row at home. A lot of the business, as you guys well know, a lot of the business is keeping the customer happy and eager to come back, even if they lose. These have been 3 bad games, including that one previous Saturday where no shots in the third period. There's not much when they're coming through the door and paying what they pay. They pay a real premium here to come to these games. Not a good product. So yes, he would change it. I don't know where he'd go, but he would change it.
How's his health, Kevin? We're concerned. Both Lynch and I have been concerned about Harry's health. And
yeah, I haven't seen him in a long time. The last time I know he was in the building, it was one of the anniversaries last year. I think it was of the 72 Cup anniversary. Am I right about that? Anyway, they brought a lot of old guys back, and from what I understand, he had a tough time getting into the team picture. So, but again, he's early 90s. I think he's got sort of what you would depict for health for most people in their early 90s. That said, guys, I'm working on a story right now of a golfer, a vet, a D-Day vet, who's 104 years old, and he golfs 3 times a week.
Whoa. Whoa.
I went out with him last week, did what I do best on the golf course, which is I drove the cart for him. And this is no lie. At 104 years old, he shot 89.
Oh my goodness.
15 under his age.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah.
So we told you folks that Dupes is much more. If you read some of the stuff, especially in the summertime, Dupes, I love those columns you write in the summertime.
Oh, thanks.
I know you take great joy in writing those columns, because A, you love doing it, and B, it just shows your versatility. And there has been some great ones that have come up. I've shot you notes here and there where.
Yes, you have, and I appreciate that.
How do you find a story like that? How does it come across your desk or your?
Well, this one, frankly, thankfully, one of my bosses found it, and some of them hit your ear right away. Obviously, this one is the 104-year-old guy who was at D-Day, and fought start to finish in Battle of the Bulge. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, they don't come across that often, but I'm constantly on the look for those. And I'll tell you, if I'm going to digress here, you guys want to move back to hockey, but what that I've been working on for a while now is there's a business. It's Ohio based. It's a one shop business, if you will. They preserve your tattoos after you die. Okay. I think it's called Ink Forever. Well, my initial thought there was this has got to be absolutely a sports story, because where do we see more ink than anywhere, right? Yeah. And oddly, when I talked to the guy who owns the business, and it involves when you die, the skin graft is taken, sent to him, and they preserve it, and families like to frame them on the wall. Not my thing, but
typical Ohio thing. If it was innovative, it had to be from Ohio. Come on.
But the guy said, there hasn't been much demand at all in the sports world. I had it in my head that, Yankee fan, Red Sox fan, tattoos, all of that, or professional athletes who spend a lot of money. And he's telling me one guy, this really is digressing. One guy had a full body tattoo, over time, and had spent upward of $250,000 to have those tattoos.
You guys have any tattoos?
No.
I don't.
No.
I don't like getting Novocaine at the dentist. I just can't imagine subjecting myself, right?
I get you. I know.
Dupont and Lynch have come in with negative responses. What's Lobel's response?
I do have a tattoo on my ankle of the college fraternity.
Do you? How drunk were you?
No, it's a good question. No, but we had to, when you were at Kent State, and this was a fraternity tradition, simply because in World War I, if you were unrecognizable in battle and the worst possible end came, that at least you'd have a tattoo on your ankle and would signify what your college fraternity was. So it was we had to drive to Hiram, Ohio, which was where the Cleveland Browns trained, for this tattoo parlor. It was like $5 for the 3 Greek letters on the inside. So that was
worth every penny. Yeah,
worth every penny. So there it is. It's on the inside of my ankle. I'm not going to show it. It's just a little awkward at the moment, but that's the way. That's all. It's almost not a tattoo. It's almost like one of those college fraternity things,
Yeah.
Now, years later, a lot of people have regrets when they get a tattoo while they're in college, some drunken stupor. Have you ever regretted getting the tattoo?
No. It's not obtrusive. It's not in the way. Once in a while on the beach, people would ask me about it because they could see it because I'd be on the beach and I wouldn't be wearing anything. But no, it's not like. I will say this: I can remember getting it, and I also remember the guy that was in front of me when he got a tattoo on his. With Homer and Dolores, with a heart and a snake in it. Homer and Dolores. That was the only thing I remember about that tattoo parlor. So that to me would be obtrusive.
I came this close once. It was a summer night over Mike DePrisco's house with Greg Brand, and the two of them said, after imbibing for quite a while, let's drive to Newport and get tattoos. It was like,
as people will.
Good idea, on, right?
Oh, what a good idea!
So they took off at around 1 a.m, and I went to bed, and we all stayed. DePrisco's parents were away, and we came back, and one of them had a longhorn on his hip, and this was Greg Brand. He went to BC. Mike DePrisco went to BU, now the BU Terrier dupes, and he got a leopard, and they got him right in the hips. And I said, does it hurt? And they said, yeah, it hurts like hell, but they drank all the way down, all the way back. And, to this day, I said, do you regret getting that? They said, oh, yeah. Well, I don't know what we were thinking about, but yeah, we regret it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So let's do this commercial about, since we're talking about driving down and getting tattoos, because I think campers probably have a lot of tattoos. And I know that all the Bruin fans that I talked to on Sunday had tattoos. I can tell you that right now. So, Lynchy, why don't you ask the question first to Kevin about if he had one of these things, where would he go? I mean, then I'll do the commercial based upon what you guys talk about.
Okay. All right. So, all right, dudes, we've done this before. This is Cold Springs RV. We all know John Madden didn't like to fly. He had a Madden Cruiser.
Yep.
Well, Cold Springs RV is still in the developmental stages of a Lobel Lynchy Cruiser. And it's really going to be something when it's finally built. It could be built like long after we're gone from this earth, but it's going to be built. But your reward and your payment for coming on the show is you get to drive the Lobel Lynchy Cruiser from Bedford to the West Coast in California. We'll fly you back. The only caveat is that you have to pick somebody you want to have riding shotgun with you.
Oh,
it could be somebody deceased, somebody alive, some historical figure. Could be a hockey player, could be a baseball player, could be a tattoo artist. It could be.
Tell him who Milbury chose.
Milbury chose Winston Churchill.
Oh, yeah.
I think he was trying to show off.
That worked.
Well, I did this before with you, and I picked Bill Lee. And I
remember that. That's right.
I still think that would have been a hell of a ride.
Yeah.
Boy, let me think about this in context for a second.
Once you read the commercial, let Dupes think about it.
Yeah.
Give me a fine. That's all good. That's a good idea. New for 2025, Cold Springs RV is next year's model, and they're coming in all the time. So check out the latest in pop-ups, travel trailers, fifth wheelers, and motorhomes. And at Cold Springs RV, the doors are always open and you can freely browse. And they're great for relationships because if you have a travel trailer and you meet somebody else that has a travel trailer and you can park right next to each other, and if the relationship goes south, one of you can leave at midnight and no one would know until you got up in the morning. It would be clean and easy, or you can just stay together. And there's just ways to make these things work. But there's the best part about it is you can make things unwork. So that's all we're saying about some of the advantages you have. The latest in camping, it's at Cold Springs RV in Ware, New Hampshire, which is west of Goffstown, north of Tingsboro, your destination for all things camping. You learn more online at coldspringsrv.com. So Dupes, that's our pitch. And we'd like to just know who you're going to take.
Yeah, I was in the political realm for a while there, but I think probably because I can go back in history.
Yes.
Well,
Let me run some people by, and you can tell us.
No, I'm a little bit torn here. I'm diminishing it, so I'm going to go with Henry David Thoreau. So,
wow.
And part of that is I've lived in Concord for the last 30 years. I've spent a whole lot, including almost drowning twice at
Don't tell me Walden's Pond.
Walden Pond as a kid. Yeah, almost rolled over twice there.
Really?
Yeah, and but that said, I mean, the whole thing about simplicity and ahead of his time in terms of kind of getting away. So yeah, that'd be my guy.
Maybe he could come back and coach the Bruins.
Yeah.
Dupes, what going to couple you guys were there every night. Us TV guys, we do the 6 o'clock live shot, get a free meal, stay for one period, go back to our stations. Playoffs, we can always do the 6 and 11 down there. But unlike the other 3 sports, I always had a smile on my face when I went down there. I mean, you walk in the door, you see Frankie Voney, you'd see the off-ice officials,
Yep.
you'd see Stanford, you'd see from Harry on down. It was just a pleasant place to be.
Well, don't forget Nate. Don't forget Nate, who was the greatest PR guy this town ever had. And the stupid Red Sox, because he was Jewish, Gene Yawkey wouldn't hire him. I'm just saying.
Called me last night, friend. Friend called me last night.
Nate was the best.
Yeah.
Yes.
What a representative! What a representative he was of that sport and that. I mean, Jeremy Jacobs didn't deserve to have Nate Greenberg.
All true, and I'll put my 5-star endorsement on that. And Nate's been a great friend for many, many years. So
I think my question is, Dupes, has that all changed? Is it still enjoyable going down there? I'm sure, like now we're creeping up in age. You look to your left, you look to your right, and you say, "My God, everyone here is young enough to be my son or my grandson."
Right. And I could fall to that and automatically say no. There's a lot that's still enjoyable, but what was true then that has disappeared, and this is across the league, and that's where I spend most of my time. But talking to my pals in the other sports, there's really no what you're talking about. I think, Lynchy, a sense of community, and just knowing the people and knowing how all the parts fit and what people were doing. It's so many of these teams and the industry now is joyless. They're not people who can laugh at themselves. The stakes are very high. The message is controlled by the team through their own in-house media entities. Many of us in the free press have disappeared entirely, not only in body, in person, but because of the strained economics and media. We don't see the suburban papers there. So who's in there? And this is probably going a little deeper than you want to go, Lynchy, but who's there on our media side? It's in many cases it's bloggers who know that if they're too critical, they're not going to be asked back. So there's no kind of protection there. So, personnel are told not to talk to us. It's a whole different world, and it isn't just because I'm the oldest living beat man in history. It's changed phenomenally, and you also don't get, as you remember, the industry was full of guys who did it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. That was kind of a norm. And now that's just been wiped out. It's basically the media side of this is very much 20 and 30 somethings who will realize that there's no financial course of a career in it, and they eventually all leave.
What about books, Kevin? What have you doing?
Yeah.
What about you and books?
That's the great should have chapter of my life. I haven't done them. I haven't. And maybe if I do get to the retirement thing, I've had some thoughts on them, but I haven't done them, and I'm to the point. I don't regret it, but it is a missing piece for me. There's no question.
Well, I don't think it'll stay missing long. I think you'll explode with books once you start. I don't think you're going to stop. But I got one question before we get back to that, and this could be my stupidity, which I'll be readily admit to. Cam Neely and O'Connell. I never could differentiate the roles that these guys played in the front office. I just have never been able to figure out where the power is, who makes the decisions, and what the relationship is. So maybe you can, and I may be stupid. Just felt, I know they're there, but what's their relationship?
Well, it's not a stupid question. It's a really good question, and it seems to come and go. But the real dynamics of running the team from a personnel standpoint, and the cap, and all those parts, and the personnel hires, much of that, 90% of it, belongs to Sweeney, and I don't think there's any question about that. Cam is you got to remember how Cam came in. Cam didn't come in to run the team. Cam came in because they were desperate for a face of the franchise. They had Charlie Jacobs. They had a lot of animosity among the fandom. Guy doesn't live here. Now he's got his son. His son isn't a good spokesman, as I call him, the executive son, Charlie Jacobs. So that's where Cam came in, and that's where he's preserved his space. He's ownership's guy. He still is the face of the franchise to a degree. It's not a franchise that at the moment there's much to crow about. But the inner workings, day to day, if you will, minutia, who you're gonna spend $80 million on, that falls to Sweeney. Sweeney's Neely is involved, but I don't see that Sweeney is going to be overruling on any of that stuff.
So confusing to me that I thought I didn't remember it was Sweeney and I said O'Connell. So it's all right.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah.
But that's it's always been a question of mine of, who does the firing, who does the hiring. Yeah,
that is Sweeney. There's no question about it. If they're gonna make those key changes, I'm not saying Cam isn't involved, but I just think I see Cam's role as a Chekhov guy. He's a good talker too. When you get talk about just hockey things, Sweeney doesn't like to talk, doesn't like to make himself available to the media. Again, this is we go back to those Sinden days. It's stark contrast. One thing that has been somewhat redundant of late from Sweeney is he's made a point a number of times now to tell us how frequently we're wrong. And we are, and hand up here, I'm wrong too. Well, some of that would be mitigated. A lot of it is if management would make itself available. So if you had a question about the technicalities of the CBA, which, frankly, I've seen general managers screw that up. When you can trade a guy, when you can't trade a guy, when you can sign a guy now with the CBA provisions, there's a million, the CBA UFA qualifications. There's a lot there. And yeah, the media gets it wrong. But But if they would make themselves available, talk more, I think a lot of that griping would go away.
Yeah, Sweeney got mad at me one day. It was not too long after the Charlie Coyle Donato trade, and I was a little bit critical at the time because the Harvard guy and son of Teddy Donato, blah blah blah.
Yeah, yeah.
And Charlie Coyle came right out of the gate. I think right after the trade, and was a major contributor. And he just I know I just had my lunch tray with me, and he made some really snide remark that was like, "Hey, wait a minute." My first response is, "Don't talk to me like that." But he made his point. He said what he had to say, and he took his tray and went to another table. And I was sitting there like my Irish was getting up, and I was simmering up to here. And then I finally just said, screw it, just let it go. But that was him. He got his point across.
Yeah, and you know what? Harry would get right in your face.
Yeah.
So again, they're entitled to their emotions, and it sort of rolls off my back now. But in the moment, it is sort of striking. I just find it interesting, again, criticizing us at large, and we all screw up. Anybody who says they don't, they're just lying. I go back to what you just said, Lobie, about O'Connell in the middle of a presser, these pregame things with Montgomery the other day. Instead of saying Zadorov, I said Nazarov, and he looked at me like I was crazy. But it's just it's stored memory that just comes out sometimes, and you get it wrong. I had this for a while when Bruce Cassidy was here and Charlie Coyle here. I grew up doing the schoolboys, decades and decades ago. There was a school, Coyle Cassidy. Coyle Cassidy might still exist. I don't know. Coyle Cassidy's in the back of my brain from schoolboy years. And I can't tell you how many stories I submitted where I was calling Cassidy Coyle and Coyle Cassidy.
When you go down, the great Lynch, you brought this up earlier. The greatness of this franchise always was in the characters that it had. Whether it was Harry, whether it was Cherry, whether it was Milbury, whether it was O'Reilly. I mean, you can go down the list. I mean, Harry's the godfather of
Cheevers,
Jonathan, Esposito.
Yes, the fighters, the scorers. Yes, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, the fighters. You can go down the list. The fighters,
Right. Winsink, yeah.
Jonathan Winsink, the great Minnesota challenge from Winsink on the bench. There are a lot of crazy guys on that team.
Yes.
And Wayne Cashman had one phone call to make when he got arrested, and he called Kowloon, right, Dupes?
Chinese food. Yes.
I mean, come on. This is like
you can't make this up,
No, you can't. I know people say, okay, what was the worst trade any Boston team ever made? Was it Babe Ruth or was it Bobby Orr? That they're comparable for sure.
Yeah. A little bit different in that Orr left as a free agent.
Career-wise,
to see guys leave a franchise, absolutely. And again, it's homogenized now. Guys are afraid to talk. Guys are afraid to show any character, and some of that is the hockey ethos about not being just part of a team. But I miss that greatly. Be it saying crazy stuff, doing crazy stuff. Some of that, of course, was an extension. We're talking about the fighters. They differentiated themselves because they were the brawlers or the scrappers.
Well, don't forget Nyland.
Nyland, sure, yeah, for good and bad there. Hey, I mean, even a guy who would I would say marginal, almost no talent. PJ Stock had sort of a good fun family, and I called him the pint-sized pugilist. He would fight everybody and get beaten up by everybody, but he was willing. So it's. Another guy, Al Iafrate, just saying.
Oh my God, Planet Iafrate, right?
It was Planet, right? Say crazy stuff, But industry wide, again, so many of those guys, as I would have had Bill Lee next to me in your Winnebago. I just love quotable guys.
So let me ask you this. We've all been asked this question 1,000 times in our careers. Who are the nicest group of guys to deal with? And people are generally shocked and surprised when we say, "Well, hockey's number one,"
Yeah.
and nobody's in second place because they are such great guys. They go, "Really? These are guys that beat the crap out of each other every single night?" I said they are the nicest, most polite, most charitable, and nobody's in second place. And baseball players are at the bottom of the pile, and people are very surprised at that.
Wouldn't you put O'Reilly at the top of that list?
Oh yeah,
I put anybody in that wore skates. I think is the greatest guys.
Yes, yeah.
Why is that, Dupes? Why are they the
That's
nicest?
so good, Mike. That's a great question.
Well, here's my theory for what it's worth: is that it is such a humbling and often humiliating sport. And the closest sport in that sense, I think, sports come to boxing and to NFL, where you're in those sports particularly, you're going to get beaten up in most cases, right? So I have talked to old time, and some of them were current when I was coming up. They told me the old time Patriots, when they talked about the old time Patriots of Hanna and Grogan, that those rooms had a lot of those guys in them. I don't know. I didn't work them. But I think what the common thread I can find, the times I've been around boxing, they'll say.
I used to think it was because most of them were a Canadian background, that they came up with they grew up with a different culture and than the American kids. And there were times when, there were hardly any American players
Correct.
in the league.
Correct. And I thought the same, Lobie. And I think that's part of it. It is still a lot of Canadian kids. And I think they are a different people. And we could cross over to politics here, and I'm not going to do that.
Good.
But that, as you know, that's changed dramatically in the sport. We've seen the Russians come in, the Finns, the Swedes, the Czechs.
Remember, Harry wanted nothing to do with anything from the Norwegians or any from Scandinavia.
Right. So
why? What did he say? I'm trying to remember what he said about the Scandinavian players or whatever, something about their toughness or.
Yeah, and that was Cherry. Cherry, of course, led that band.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Against the Swedes. And again, they're different people. They play it. They've grown up on a different sport. They've grown up in many of the Europeans grown up on a different ice sheet, bigger ice sheet. So, but what I do find is no matter where they're from, I think what we're talking about here in terms of being decent, nice people in most cases, and there's like anything, there's jerks. But I think it's the sport itself and the function of you can be a great player and yeah, that's important. Most players aren't. Most players are going to rise or fall based on the quality of the team, quality of teammates, relying on teammates. And again, that really is, Lynch, you played football. I mean, you as you well know, I mean, how good is the quarterback going to be if the line's not there for him? So I think it's just how the sport is built, how it's played. I don't necessarily see any of that in baseball, which was my first love. I don't see much of it in the NBA. I think it comes down to the people who are attracted to the sport for what it is and the honest ones who know their success. I mean, as great as Connor McDavid is, and I'm not around Connor McDavid, so I can't make a judgment here what kind of guy he is, but as great as he is, they don't win just because he's the greatest player. Who's won? The best team out there right now is Florida, just won the cup, having a great year. They're well constituted and they're good guys.
Yeah, I mean, we all have stories. Hockey people don't know the meaning of the word no, especially if you've got a kid in the neighborhood who's down on his luck or something like that, and all you have to do is just whisper, "Hey, you get an autographed picture for Frankie Bank, it's like on your desk or in the mail the next day, and that has been the case since I first were exposed to hockey people, and it's just I'm just blown away at the generosity. And I think, Lobie, I think you're right. I think Canadian people are brought up with more respect for authority, more respect for their parents, their aunts and uncles, and I think it's different.
But then those kids, the really talented kids in Canada, they lived in different homes. They lived in other, there was a lot of, parents would take kids in so they could play in that locale.
It is. What's that term called, Dupes?
Billets. Yep.
Yes.
Billets.
Yeah.
Billets.
So for those who don't know what that's about is the 16-year-old kid goes away from Southern Ontario and he's assigned, he's drafted and he goes to the team in Sudbury, Ontario, which is hours away. Typically what happens is that player goes and lives with another family, a host family, and stays with them for the year. And they often create great bonds, not only with the mom or dad who has sponsored them, but their kids, often younger kids. So that is another very quaint part of the system. I do know Bobby Orr, who lived in Parry Sound, his mother didn't want him to bill it. He wanted her son home. So when he went to Oshawa, he didn't bill it. He basically commuted.
Wow. He couldn't drive, could he? Could he drive when he commuted?
I think it was in those cases, and you see a lot of this short of the juniors. You see a lot of this in AAA. What remains amateur hockey at the sub-junior level in the States. It's often parents who will just shuttle those kids, sometimes 2 hours each way, to practices and games. So the parents are committing 4 and 5 hours just in commute time, and they're hanging in the rink and drinking that vending machine coffee, hot chocolate for a few hours. So.
Weren't they? Didn't his mom? I think she came to one game. It's hard. Orr's mother. I think I can remember the night that she came to the Garden. His mother was the first time that she'd seen him play.
Yeah. She might have been there. I don't know. I never met his mom, but I think she might have been there for the clinching game in '70.
Yeah,
which is the one where he goes flying. I could be. I know his dad was there.
It was interesting. So many great stories. Human interest stories are unbelievable in that league.
Did you ever bill it, Bob, anywhere?
No.
No tattoos allowed.
No, I don't know.
Well, Bridgewater State would count, wouldn't it?
Yeah, maybe.
Dupes,
I don't know. There is something about. I would love to see this team get more competitive because of what it would do to the fan base.
Yes.
I mean, the fan base is, as you mentioned, both you guys, is so remarkable. It's so hard to describe the fan base, but if nothing else, it's rock solid and loyal.
Yeah, and it's going to be tested here, no question about it. I mean, we're going to hear Nesson's ratings are down, that there are more tickets available than there used to be. I mean, that's just part of the business and part of general economics, and frankly, part of the economic times right now. When teams aren't good and aren't competitive, it's far easier for people to surrender now at $150, $200 a ticket than back in the bronze era when we got in, when it was for $2 you could sit upstairs. It's just there's not a cheap option anymore. So there's going to be some softening of that, and I'm sure we're going to hear that very soon. But by and large, people have hung in. People have hung in.
You think Jacobs will ever sell?
I don't. Not in our lifetimes. No, it's such a. There's the high equity value of the team itself. He owns the building. If
it wasn't for Larry Moulter, he'd have sold the building.
Yeah. He's got substantial, as we know, developmental interests in the buildings that have been built around the Garden. So no, I think it's such a profitable play. Owns the garage at $65 a game. If we're talking, it's just I go out of town and I see, tonight's game, $20, $15. It's 65.
I know.
So no, I wouldn't see that. I don't know, crystal ball wise, I don't know where the Celtics are going. I don't know who's going to buy that. This whether the Globe owner John Henry gets involved, Globe Red Sox owner, vastly different.
Yeah, I'll say. Well, they have other interests. Yeah, totally different business model. For
Do
sure.
you have an all-time favorite character, the Bruins, of all your years?
Again, it's a long list of good guys. I've always enjoyed Cheevers. Just honest, simple.
Did you ever come back in the state?
Ice pretty much Florida all the time.
I don't. What was that story? He wasn't allowed back in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I think that was over some gambling stuff.
Right.
One of my favorite stories that he told recently is he grew up in St. Catharines, Ontario, which is really just kind of over the border near a really nice town called Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario. And he grew up in the same town with Stan Mikita, same era. So Cheever's mother made him take piano lessons. To this day, I don't know if he can play, which is really kind of irrelevant to this story. But it just wasn't cool to be a hockey player and a piano player. Today, people would think that's great. And I do too. I would have thought it then, but it's great. But you can imagine what the label was if you were a piano player on the hockey team, right? So unfortunately, Cheever's mom signed him up for lessons with the woman who gave the lessons out of her house, who lived next to Stan Mikita. So Cheevers would almost have to go in down the driveway on all fours, so Stan wouldn't see him going for his weekly piano lessons with Mrs. Parker or whatever her name was. But you can just hear, you guys know Cheevers, you can just hear him telling the story, right? I mean,
When I first got out of college, I belonged to Indian Ridge up in Andover Golf Course, where Cheevers belonged.
Right.
And Cheesy was known to bet on like a college football game or two. So anyway, I met him. He couldn't have been nicer. And someone told him that I was broadcasting Harvard football games on the radio. So he'd be sitting there with a cigar, and he'd say, "Hey, Harvard Cornell today. What do you think?" I said, "Harvard always plays well at Cornell. Cornell underperforms. I will take Harvard." So he must have won. So the next week, I'm on like a sixth hole, and he's on the first fairway. Here comes the golf cart driving perpendicular to the fairways, bouncing over rocks. He goes, "All right." He goes, "Harvard at Princeton today. Who do you like?" I'd say, we always call Princeton Sleepy Hollow. For some reason, we went down there. If we won, we barely just won. We just played like crap, so we never covered. All right, so he took Princeton, and Princeton covered. From then on, every week I'd be going out I'd be on a Thursday, and here comes Cheesy. All right, Mike, Columbia, Harvard. Who are you liking this one? And it was hysterical. And I'm, of course, I'm telling all my buddies I went to high school with. I said, Jerry Cheevers. First of all, Jerry Cheevers knows your name. I said, he only knows my name because I gave him a couple of winners.
Yeah.
But
that's
great.
That
was my first interaction with Jerry. It was hilarious. So much fun.
In his coaching days in the early 80s, they would be in, I forget what the name of the rink was. I think it was in Middleton. I do remember the because the setting here is important. The office was basically under the stands, so the stands would take off half the headroom in Cheever's office. So we would all sit there, we'd all interview him like this, and he'd be like this too. And his joke was, of course, that even the mice were hunchback. But the point of that story is he would always have the racing form right on his desk.
Yeah.
And we would come in and he'd put the racing form down. He says, he'd give us the 6 or 7 minutes or whatever we need, the latest injuries, the next opponent, yada, 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 yada. Okay, right back to the racing form.
The only other guy in the room that would understand it would be Newmeyer.
No question
yeah.
about it.
The racing form.
Pucks and ponies. That's it.
That racing form might as well be written in Chinese, because nobody else understands what's on that racing form unless you are a horse racing aficionado.
Right. I remember Newmeyer, toting books around with him.
He'd write little notes. He'd carry things.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that would be the case today with all the computer stuff, but he lugged books.
No, he wouldn't go to the computer. He'd have his books.
Well, let me get the spot in for our good friend George Gray right here. Hey, if you're thinking about getting a new vehicle, go with Lobel and Lynch and go. That's right. Go see our good friend George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. We have been customers for years because they know that George Gray and his staff will treat you right. They're a family-owned and operated dealership that we trust and you can trust as well. Go see the big wheel, we call him, the great George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. I was in there last week. I had a check engine light on my car, and I went in, and they took it out. They took it on the road. They ran through everything, and the light went off, and it was just a simple thing. Somebody did not screw the gas cap on last time I got gas, and that's the reason it went on. But that's the type of service and personal service that they will give you every time you go in there. George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. We were in Milwaukee for a Celtics-Bucks series, and they played like Sunday, Thursday. So we had like a half a day off. He says, "What are you doing tomorrow?" I said, "I don't know. We're going to go for a jog." He goes, "Well, I need a wingman. I need a guy to drive the car for me." I said, "What are we going to do? Rob a bank?" He said, "No, we're going to drive down to Arlington Park in Chicago, which is a 90-mile ride, right?" Yeah. And so, I drive in the car, and the whole time he's got his pencil out and his pen out and his notebook, and we go into the Arlington Park. Of course, we go right to the clubhouse, and steak sandwiches and the whole thing. And I'm betting $2 here, $2 there, and Newey's pulls out a big wad or something, and then I have no idea what he's doing. But it was a happy ride home to Milwaukee.
Good.
So that was cheesy. Cheesy was the same way though.
Yeah, I miss Newmeyer so much. I mean, I can't tell you how much I miss him so much.
Absolutely.
Big hockey guy too, Dupes, right?
Loved it. Yep. He and I were copy boys together at the Globe in the early 70s.
Really?
And Mike Lupica was another one. And he loved it then. And as you know, voice of the Whalers for a while.
Yeah.
He was fearless. I mean, I think you have to be fearless to bet like that. I mean, he would win big, he'd lose big.
Oh.
And that's just the nature of the game. And if you were in it to play it like he was, it was a passion for him. I don't think it was an addiction. It was a passion for him. Yeah. And he was good at it.
He was really good. Yeah, really good.
And it was great on NBC when they would do the big 3 horse races, and he'd be there walking from the barn to the paddock, and he knew everything, and he was very, very good at it on television. He was good at everything. He grew up in his early days before he moved to Weymouth. He lived in Winthrop, which that's why he spent so much time at the track over at Suffolk.
Oh,
his dad used to take him over there. Railbird.
Wasn't that Ed?
Yeah, Ed Newmeyer.
Yeah. Ed. Yep.
Kevin, you were great today. This was a fast hour, I'll tell you that. I was.
If you need a guy to blab, I'm here.
I know. Believe me, I know. I don't know where this hockey team is going. We can circle back, and I'll ask you: is Montgomery going to make it through the year? Is he going to make it through the week? You can't have too many performances like you had last night and the last 3 nights at home, and expect to survive. He must know he's on the short leash.
Yeah, it feels that way. It feels to me like he's positioned as a shield now, that they can fire him later, do the search, and try to distract people from the fact that they've put together a bad team. So if we had Newmeyer here, he'd give us the odds. And
But we get the next best thing, Bob. Right behind your head, we get the panic button. Will we be hitting the
Right.
panic button, Bob? Will you be hitting that soon
Yeah.
or later? Sooner or later, Bob?
As
No,
a
I think
sit-
in this case, I think it's now.
As certain as Frank Mahavlich hit the net.
Right there.
Right there.
All right, Dupes. Thanks so
There's
much.
no sense, for the Red Sox, there's no sense pushing it because it wouldn't matter anyway.
All right, lads. It was great fun. Thanks for having me as always. I appreciate it.
I told you, everybody, he's a great writer and one of the most talented guys we know, and a good friend to all. Kevin Paul Dupont. Thanks, everyone, and make sure you follow us at unanchoredboston.com.